Hello, Taylor Elwood here, and welcome to the Sacred Masculinity podcast. Today, I want to talk about a topic that is essential, I think, to becoming just really a healthy person, and that is how to be in integrity with your life. And so, we're going to explore what it means to be in integrity and, and what is integrity. I find that a lot of the challenges that we face in our lives can be solved if we operate from a place of integrity, not because it makes those challenges, if anything, in some ways it makes them harder, but because it means that we're clear on how we want to show up. So when I think about what is integrity, I would say that integrity is the choice to do something whether whether someone else is or isn't observing what regardless of what you'll get out of it. And I think that's a pretty simplistic way of looking at integrity. I also think that integrity is more than just telling the truth. And so lately I've been thinking a lot about what does it mean to live integrity? Because I would say up until really the last few years, I have not lived a life in integrity. Um, I have lived a life where I have looked out for myself first and foremost, and I've done it at the cost of other people at times. And I learned that. I learned it early on. I learned it from my dad. I learned it from my stepmom. I learned it from other people in my life. And it doesn't mean that I didn't ever do stuff for other people. There were times that I would, but there was a calculation in my mind where it was kind of like, I'm doing this because I'll get something at some point down the line. This person will owe me a favor, or there will be other things. And so there was this covert contract, and this was very nice guy behavior. It's not much different from narcissism in some ways. And I'm not saying that I was ever a narcissist. Is that living in integrity? In integrity, you do it because you understand what your core values are, and you're choosing to live your life regardless of what you get or don't get from the situation or other people. And it is hard to live in integrity because we live in a society where so often what is espoused is really kind of the easy way, which is to look out for yourself. It's to do what is convenient and easy for yourself. But as a man and a person, a human being, what I've really been reflecting on over the last few years is, how do I want to continue to show up? Is this My first realization around this came when I got out of my second marriage. I was not in integrity in that marriage. I wasn't in integrity and I wasn't in integrity with my ex-wife. I was people pleasing, and I allowed a lot of things to occur that I didn't agree with because I was trying to quote unquote keep the peace. And that is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned about integrity, is that when you're trying to keep the peace, it costs you significantly. Because if you're afraid, I'm not talking about like, I'm going to punch like that. That's not what I'm talking about by conflict. But what I mean is, if you're not afraid to say, like, hey, this is a boundary here, and this is not something that I agree, this is something I need to hold for myself. Other people will walk all over you. And the fact is, the matter is, people will walk all over you a lot of the time if they can get what they want. And a lot of times they're not even doing it purposely. They're doing it out of unconscious self-interest. I mean, that was a lot of what was happening. And I would say it was a lot of what was happening on my end. I just wasn't or aware. Now, there were things I was conscious and aware of. There were choices that I was making where I know like what I was making were not right choices, but I was being selfish. I cared about myself. And I thought it was more important to satisfy my desires and needs, even though I was going about it the wrong way by going behind the back of the person I was with. And I can talk about that now. At one time, I couldn't. I felt a lot of shame around it, but I can talk about it now because I've forgiven myself for it. And I recognize that it was, you know, something that I learned in my childhood. I learned it from my dad because of the way he behaved, and I learned it as a survival mechanism. And I can forgive myself for that because it's not the way that I'm showing up anymore. I'm not showing up that way anymore because I see the cost, not just in terms of myself. Yeah, but the cost also in terms of the impact on other people's lives that I really want to be responsible for. I am responsible for it. I will be responsible for the cost of my choices for the rest of my life. Now that cost has a diminishing effect to some degree, I think. Sometimes have a greater effect, but it diminishes more than likely over time. But something I have to be honest and present with. Nonetheless, here was a cost. The rebound relationship that I got into after that marriage, it's funny, I'm grateful for that relationship now. I wasn't for a long time, but I had a realization the other day that that relationship was perhaps one of the best gifts that was given to me because the person essentially broke me out of my shell of self involvement and helped me see just how selfish I was. I was making some changes. I really was. But she really called out some things in a very blunt manner that I didn't want to see at the time. But now that I've stepped further away from it, I see, and I'm like, I feel some gratitude for this person. I'm glad I'm not with that person. I would never want to be with that person again. There was definitely some issues on her end as well, but it was interesting for me because it was like, oh wow, I have I have a much better sense. And that's when I started getting into the men's work because I realized I didn't know my relationship with myself. I didn't have a good relationship with myself. How could I have a good relationship with anyone else if I didn't have a good relationship with me? So I think that part of integrity is that you have to learn how to have a good relationship with yourself. If I'm going to be in integrity with anyone else, I have to first and foremost be in integrity with myself. If I'm not in integrity with myself, how could I possibly be in integrity with anyone else? I can't. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to people please. To do other things. And so in my most recent relationship, this was kind of what happened. I didn't do as much people pleasing, but I still did a fair amount. And I wasn't in integrity with myself. And as a result, I certainly wasn't in integrity with that other person. Because again, how could I be to try and get that person's approval? And it would work in the short term sometimes, but in general, it didn't. Person lost if they were ever attracted to me, lost their attraction to me more and more. Um, and it was a good lesson. And again, I feel for that person because it's like I'm seeing this now. Like the scales have come off the eyes. If else we have to value ourselves and we have to know what our values is two different things. So if I value myself, I'm thinking that I deserve respect. I deserve love. I deserve care. And I know that I have to meet that first and foremost. No one else can do that for me. People can love me and they can care about me. And and I want that. I mean, I really do. But I also have to love and value and respect myself. Now, part of how I love, value, respect myself is I set clear boundaries. I say to myself, what are the values I need to have in order to myself? What is it I need to do to value and appreciate who I am? And what I've come to realize is that I value myself when I have a clear sense as to what my core values are. Like I can safely of my core values is that I'm going to be honest with myself and with other people. I can say that I am going to continue working on confidence and being able to set clear boundaries with people and being able to live with the fact that other people might not approve of me and that I can walk away from relationships instead of clinging on to them from a place of neediness. I would say that a lesson I've realized is that, sometimes I've stayed with people because I lose them and yet I've lost them anyway. And the reason I've lost them is because I wasn't showing up in a way that said, like, hey, I value myself enough to walk away. And if I choose to stay with you, it's because I'm invested and you're invested and we genuinely want to be with each other. It's taken me a long time to figure, and I think it takes people in general a long time because we are taught that the relationships that have the most value are relationships with other people. But I would argue that the relationship with yourself is the most valuable one because you're the person you have to live with yourself. You're the person you have to live with every single day for the rest of your life. And if you don't have a clear sense of value for yourself, it is very hard, in fact, almost impossible for people to really show up in a way that is genuine and real. And that's what I've discovered for myself. If I'm going to live a life of integrity, first and foremost, I have to show up for myself. I have to figure out what my values are. Who am I? How am I showing up to take care of myself? And how in turn does that translate into how I take care of other people? How does it translate in terms for how I show up for other people? If I'm not clear on that, it's really hard to have a safe relationship with somebody else. And a safe relationship with someone else is one where I can be vulnerable. I can let them in. I can do it in a way that feels powerful and transformative and helps me and helps them. Does that happen if I'm completely 100% honest with myself? It doesn't. It can't happen that way. So, when you look at your own life, what does integrity mean to you? How are you showing up for yourself? What are you doing to support and believe in yourself? These are the questions that you want to be asking because if you're not in integrity with yourself, you certainly can't be in integrity with anyone else. It was interesting. Last night, yesterday, this event all day. I got there early in the morning to help set up. I stayed there I stayed there throughout the day. And at a certain point, I was given a get out of free jail card, so to speak. Someone needed a ride somewhere. It was the end of the day, and I could take that person and drop them off. And the person who asked me to do that said, I don't blame you. I know you'd originally planned on staying to help out, but I don't blame you if you go. Like you can go. Like it's okay. And I knew he genuinely meant it. He was coming at it from a place of integrity, like, hey, you've done so much today, you don't need to do anything more. And what I did is I dropped that person off, the other person off. I dropped her off at her hotel and thanked her for showing up, said my goodbyes and all that. And then what I did is I came to the event and I helped continuing to tear stuff down because I knew that although I could get that get out of free jail card, it was more important to me that I showed up for those people. I was in integrity with myself. I had made an agreement that I was going to be there. And to me, honoring myself meant honoring that agreement. And that to me is what integrity is that if I make an agreement with you, I'm going to honor that agreement. If I make a promise to you, I'm going to follow through and honor that. Now, I'm not going to do it to my own detriment. If I make a promise to you and it's a promise that where I'm actually hurting myself to keep that promise, I'm going to let that go. And that's aspect of integrity as well. Integrity should never come at the price of my own well-being because then I'm going to start operating out of integrity anyway. Integrity should come about because I am operating from a place of awareness and perspective. I am operating from a place of honoring myself and respecting myself enough to say, I value who I am and how I show up. And I am choosing to value myself enough to say, I made this promise. I recognize that I'm breaking it. I am breaking it because it's having on me to keep that promise, and it is not a good impact. This Now there's a lesson there too. Like maybe I shouldn't have made that promise in the first place. That's a fair statement. And my response to that is I probably shouldn't make a promise if I can't keep it. Promise that I can't keep, it will end up backfiring. It will not serve me. So look at your own life. Where are you making promises? Who are you making promises to? Are you honoring yourself and are you honoring them? Can you if you're not honoring yourself, you are probably getting walked all over. And that being walked all over will cause you to break your promises. So value and respect yourself enough to say this is my truth, this is what I need, and I love myself enough in and where I'm doing something that doesn't work. So those are my thoughts on integrity right now. This will probably change as I continue to explore this topic, but I wanted to share it with you and I'd ask, what do you think? How do you show up in integrity with yourself? How do you show up in integrity with other people? I would love to hear your thoughts, and please go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell so that you can hear more from me. Have a great day.